When you're asked to do something that doesn't sit right with you, you're asked to do something that isn't part of your constitution as a man, how do you deal with those situations?
The fallout from the league was absolutely wild. Let's break it down. Tillman officially turned in his badge in early 2025. He had been operating as a special agent out of the Chicago branch since 2018. His reason for bailing was crystal clear, and he laid it all out on the Pivot Times podcast back in September 2025.
So, one of the reasons, let me start off by saying this. FBI was great to me. I did awesome. I worked with an amazing group of...
Now, pump the brakes before anyone gets it twisted. Tillman was never an ICE agent. He was strictly FBI. But come January 2025, Chicago agents got orders to back up ICE raids, a crackdown led by border czar Tom Homan and TV's Dr. Phil McGraw. They called it Operation Midway Blitz, a massive joint strike pulling in ICE, the DEA, ATF, Border Patrol, and U.S. Marshals to flood the city.
I think some of the things that they're doing now, I personally didn't agree with.
Like what?
Immigration.
Tillman noted that while the official PR claimed they were hunting the worst monsters, the reality on the pavement told a different story.
Everybody was told you're gonna go after like the most dangerous criminals. But what you see on TV and what actually was happening is like people weren't going after that.
He insisted the scene on the Chicago streets didn't match the promises on the news. The crosshairs weren't on the dangerous threats. They were aiming at everyday folks. And for a guy who spent 8 years breaching entry points to collar violent felons, hardcore gangbangers, and drug lords, that distinction meant everything.
And personally, that didn't sit right with me. That didn't sit right with my conscience. Like, you have the ability to refuse an order.
When one of the big raids went down, he ghosted the operation completely to catch his daughter's basketball game. Not long after, he surrendered his badge. Now, here's the kicker that sets Tillman apart from the pack of agents who felt the same way. He admitted plenty of his co-workers hated the new marching orders just as much, but they were financially handcuffed to the job.
I was in a different position because of my previous career. I made enough money to where I could just walk away and say, you know what, guys? I'm okay. I think I'm good.
So yeah, walking away from a government paycheck wasn't exactly going to leave him homeless. But his point wasn't about the bank account. It was about integrity. He needed to be able to tell his kids down the line that he made the honest choice. He wanted the freedom to look them dead in the eye and say he stood on the right side of history.
Today, I want to be on the right side of history when it's all said and done.
And Tillman made sure to clarify he wasn't trashing the Bureau. He gave props to the agency and his squad. He called his 8-year run solid and praised the teamwork, but the new mandates rolling down from D.C. crossed a moral boundary he wouldn't touch.
Some of the stuff you guys are doing now, I don't necessarily agree with. And that's not in Chicago. That comes from Washington.
He left with class. No bad blood, no bitterness, just a man who looked at the ask and said no. The story exploded after that Pivot Times podcast episode dropped in September 2025. Then The Athletic Times released a massive deep dive in January 2026, fleshing out his 8 years behind the badge. Once those details hit the web, the reactions poured in. The Pivot Times crew sitting across from him had the rawest, loudest takes, and their reaction to Tillman set the tone for the whole conversation. Asterisk. The Pivot Times reacts. Ryan Clark, Fred Taylor, and Channing Crowder have chopped it up with hundreds of pros, stars, and icons on their show. But when Charles Tillman pulled up a chair in September 2025, those 3 NFL vets heard things that genuinely floored them. This wasn't your standard retirement chat. This was a man breaking down federal raids, high-speed foot chases, hostage rescues, and the exact moment he chose to walk away from it all. Clark, the ex-Steelers safety turned ESPN powerhouse, dubbed Tillman's shift from gridiron to G-man the greatest pivot ever. He connected the dots between a quarterback dissecting a defense and an agent reading the room during a raid. The split-second choices, the threat detection, the knack for keeping your pulse slow when the heat turns up. Clark clocked the link instantly, ensuring the crowd knew Tillman didn't just wander into this gig by accident. The man was engineered for the job. As Tillman spun yarns about chasing fugitives on foot, Clark was eating it up. We are talking about hurdling fences and hunting down targets in street gear, rocking a fresh pair of Jordans. Clark lost it, cracking up at the mental image of an elite Pro Bowl corner sprinting after criminals in basketball sneakers. Yet, beneath the laughter lay a bedrock of serious admiration. Clark recognized this was not a game. This was high-stakes law enforcement with life-or-death consequences. When the conversation turned to his resignation, the room got heavy. Clark posted a clip on X, highlighting Tillman's moral stance, and it exploded with 2,975 likes and 619,000 views. Clark really felt the weight of that rock-and-a-hard-place scenario Tillman faced. Imagine being ordered to violate your core code refuse and torch your career, or comply and carry that guilt forever. Clark made it known he backed the exit strategy completely. Then Channing Crowder, the former Miami Dolphins linebacker, came in from left field. He questioned why anyone would trade the plush retirement life to voluntarily kick indoors and dodge live rounds. Crowder asked him point blank, "You swap getting crunched by 300-pound giants for staring down gunmen, and you chose that?" It was a valid point. The league is brutal, sure, but the Bureau? That is a whole different beast without referees to blow the whistle. There is no instant replay, and the opposition isn't trying to tackle you, they are trying to end you. But Crowder's doubt quickly morphed into reverence. Tillman dropped a gem about a raid where the perp actually clocked who he was mid-cuffing. The guy looks up from the floor and goes, "Hey, aren't you Peanut Tillman?" Crowder absolutely lost it. The idea of a felon fanboying while getting collared by the feds is comedy gold, but Tillman kept it stone cold. He would remind them that his stats were the least of their worries right then. "But I need to know, what is the vibe when you are raiding a spot and the guy yells, 'Hey man, ain't you Charles Tillman?'" Tillman broke down exactly how those surreal interactions played out in the heat of the moment. The fan excitement evaporated fast. "It is funny, sure, but I would always say, you have got way bigger fish to fry. You have more critical issues to focus on than me being Charles." Reality hit hard because the man standing over them was not holding a Sharpie for signatures. It is that realization of having the feds at your door, and it just happens to be Charles Tillman and a squad of agents. But yeah, okay, stuff just got very real. On the ICE departure, Crowder praised Tillman's backbone for walking away when the mission clashed with his morals. He labeled the tactics as overreach and fully backed Tillman's play to cut ties. Fred Taylor, the Jacksonville Jaguars legend, might have hit the hardest note of the trio. Taylor dubbed Tillman's Bureau Tales the absolute best content they have ever aired on the show, and that carries weight coming from a crew that has interviewed the titans of sports and culture. Taylor tipped his cap to the fact that while most vets drift into luxury, Tillman stepped into the line of fire for strangers. Taylor noted that most cats retire to the golf course, but Tillman went out to save lives. When it came to the resignation, Taylor called it a masterclass in standing on business. He zeroed in on the moment Tillman chose his daughter's basketball game over a sketchy immigration sweep. That wasn't just playing hooky on an operation, it was a declaration. Tillman signaled to the Bureau and the world that his blood and his code ranked higher than any order from D.C. Taylor also spotlighted the disturbing quota system Tillman exposed. The notion that agents were squeezed to chase stats instead of neutralizing real threats really rattled Taylor. He viewed it as a pollution of the badge and saluted Tillman for refusing to play that game. The hosts were in total lockstep. Tillman was righteous for joining, and righteous for quitting. No debate. Nobody argued he should have shut up and followed orders. Their platform blasted this narrative out to millions who otherwise wouldn't have known the real score. But the Pivot crew were not the only gridiron voices chiming in. Legends who actually lined up against him offered their own perspective on his DNA, adding fresh depth to the saga. NFL icons speak up. Calvin Johnson knows exactly what it feels like to get rocked by the peanut punch. The Hall of Fame wideout battled Tillman for years in the NFC North trenches, and he didn't mince words about Tillman's impact. Johnson labeled him the ultimate warrior, crediting that legendary punch with completely rewriting the defensive playbook. He confessed to taking a couple of those shots to the ribs personally, adding a statement that lands with serious impact coming from a legend of his stature. Johnson insisted that the sheer volume of forced turnovers makes Tillman a bona fide Hall of Fame candidate who deserves the jacket. That cosign is crucial because it bridges the gap between his relentless gridiron aggression and the integrity required to join the Bureau and then leave it on moral grounds. Johnson placed him right at the pinnacle of every corner he ever lined up against. That standing wasn't purely about athleticism, it was about his motor. Tillman was a machine that just kept coming. The guy simply didn't know how to coast. That same grit powered him through an 8-year federal career and gave him the steel to walk away when the mission clashed with his conscience. Pittsburgh star T.J. Watt adds another layer, citing Tillman as the architect behind his own resume of 36 forced fumbles. Watt picked up the specific mechanics of the punch from a coach who had been in Tillman's orbit, noting that dissecting Tillman's tape was the key to unlocking one of the deadliest stripping arsenals in the game today. Watt's take on the resignation highlights a deep reverence for Tillman's visionary mindset. He wasn't one to settle for the status quo, he was always hunting for a smarter way to win. It didn't matter if he was jarring balls loose or challenging federal bureaucracy to look in the mirror. Former Bears tackle Anthony Adams weighed in, offering the unique vantage point of a guy who battled alongside him in the trenches every single day. Adams joked that whenever he spotted the name Tillman next to the number 33, his legs started pumping automatically, knowing there was a solid chance the ball was about to hit the turf. He recalled how Tillman's refusal to quit on a snap forced the entire defense to level up their intensity. Adams views the federal agent path as a natural evolution. A guy who grinds that hard on the field isn't going to slack off when carrying a badge. So when a man like that hands in his resignation, you know it's for a monumental reason. Then you have Ndamukong Suh, the defensive giant who sat down with the legend on his No Free Lunch podcast. Suh marveled at the transition from all-pro corner to special agent, calling it an incredibly unique career switch, and digging into how his gridiron flexibility set him up perfectly for the unpredictable world of federal investigations. He was fascinated by the similarities between diagnosing an offensive scheme and assessing a threat in the field. Regarding the departure, Suh applauded it as a move of pure integrity after 8 years of service. To really grasp why these opinions matter, you have to look at the absolute havoc Tillman wreaked on the field. The Chicago Bears snagged him 35th overall in the second round of the 2003 draft. Born in 1981, he lived the military brat life, bouncing between 12 schools while his dad served a 20-year Army stint that included a tour in Germany. That nomadic lifestyle wired discipline and resilience into his system long before he ever strapped on a helmet. At Louisiana Lafayette, he was a menace, racking up 284 stops, a dozen picks, and 5 forced fumbles over 4 years. He anchored the Bears' defense for 12 seasons, starting 164 of the 168 games he played between 2003 and 2014. The numbers are staggering: 912 tackles, 44 forced strips, 9 recoveries, 3 sacks, 2 blocked kicks, 140 deflections, plus 38 picks for 675 yards and 8 scores. For 9 of his 13 years, he snagged at least 3 picks a season. He hit the Pro Bowl twice, made first-team All-Pro in 2012, and took home the Walter Payton Man of the Year trophy in 2013 for his work with critically ill kids. That charity work was born from personal trauma. His daughter Tiana needed a heart transplant in 2008 at just 2 years old. In 2012 alone, the man forced 10 fumbles and took 3 interceptions all the way to the house. He helped drive Chicago to Super Bowl 41, a painful loss to the Colts that makes him despise the month of February. To this day, he still hasn't watched the tape. He joined the Carolina Panthers in 2015 to link back up with Ron Rivera and helped push them to Super Bowl 50 before a torn ACL sidelined him. He officially hung up his cleats on July 18, 2016, with a hilarious clip where he peanut punched himself out of the game. Lance Briggs dubbed him the ultimate foxhole guy, the teammate you absolutely need when chaos breaks out. That grit followed him from the stadium directly to the FBI Academy. But his time as an agent wasn't just about paperwork and protests. Before the headlines about policy disputes, he was out there doing legitimate street work. There's even a crazy story about a Chicago rapper getting raided, looking up, and freezing in disbelief at who was cuffing him. It all went down in 2018 when Lil Reese found himself face-to-face with Agent Tillman, a joint task force bringing together the FBI and Chicago PD, kicked in the doors of the rapper's Windy City residence. Tavares Taylor, better known to the streets as Lil Reese, was already a heavyweight in the drill scene, having made his name dropping tracks alongside Chief Keef. The feds swept the place and scooped up roughly $100,000 in cash, a stack Reese swears vanished into thin air since they never pinned a single charge on him. But what flipped this from a standard bust into an internet legend wasn't the money, it was the face behind the badge standing on his porch. Reese clocked one of the agents immediately. It was Peanut himself, Charles Tillman, no doubt about it. They raided the spot, rounded up the whole crew, and had us all face down on the kitchen floor, Reese recalled. While pinned to the ground, Reese nudged his associate, nodding toward the guy in the tactical vest. He couldn't believe an ex-bear was raiding his house, so he had to ask. I'm elbowing my guy like, yo, look, isn't that the dude from the Bears? Am I tripping? So I hollered at him, what's good? You Charles Tillman, right? Tillman didn't flinch. He didn't say yes, didn't say no. He just shot back a cold, don't worry about it. I turned back to my homie and whispered, that's him, man. That's the cornerback. He's a Fed now. Turns out, the gridiron legend really had traded his jersey for a badge. The rumor mill started spinning in 2019 thanks to a segment on hip-hop lately. Reese eventually spilled the tea in a 2022 sit-down with Vlad TV, a clip that has since racked up over 360,000 views. He vented about the missing cash and the fact that the case went nowhere, no charges, no court date, just empty pockets. Reese figured fighting for that $100,000 was a trap. He brought up the BMF downfall, remembering how Southwest T got the whole crew taken down over $4 million in jewelry. He decided to eat the loss. Better to be broke and free than rich and locked up. Fast forward to January 2026, and Tillman finally clapped back in a profile for The Athletic. He shut down the rumors, claiming he never exchanged words with Reese and calling that story about the $100,000 a straight-up fabrication. Tillman insisted it was just standard procedure, a joint gig with local cops. Bottom line, their stories are miles apart and aren't likely to meet in the middle. True or not, that raid turned into urban legend, a shadow that trailed Tillman's entire G-Man career. Reddit had a field day with it. Subreddits like r/bears, r/cheericology, and r/n, f, l turned the encounter into a meme factory. People were cracking jokes like, imagine getting raided and Peanut Tillman is the one kicking down your door. It didn't help that Tillman tried to go undercover using aliases. He'd introduce himself as Wendell Thompson to stay low-key, but hiding in plain sight is tough when you're 6'2", built like a tank, and spent a decade on primetime TV. It happened constantly. Suspects would freeze, squint, and realize they were being cuffed by a Pro Bowler. On the pivot, Tillman broke it down. Once the starstruck moment passes, reality hits him like a truck. The autograph requests die down real quick when they realize they're heading to booking instead of the Super Bowl. But forget the memes. Tillman's FBI jacket was serious business, packed with high-stakes takedowns. He helped stop the kidnapping of Governor Gretchen Whitmer, pulled hostages out of harm's way, and was boots on the ground after the Highland Park tragedy. He worked the Safe Streets Task Force out of Chicago, hunting down gang leaders and tackling the city's most violent threats. The man was elite firearms expert, CQB specialist, even flying out to Kenya to train international forces in combat tactics. Yet, even with the badge and the gun, he never lost his humanity. He was the type of agent to offer a suspect a stick of gum or let them hug their kids one last time before the cuffs went on. His motto, I ain't here to judge. We're all just people. That moral compass is exactly why the new ICE mandates broke him. Tillman signed up to hunt monsters, traffickers, killers, the kings of the underworld. That was the oath he took. But when orders shifted to rounding up laborers just to hit quotas, he walked away, and the internet had his back completely. A top comment on the Reddit NFL thread racked up 2,226 upvotes, putting it perfectly, Charles Tillman is just a solid human. Respect for him transcends any team loyalty. Over on X, Ian Yeager's breakdown of the resignation exploded with over 4,000 likes and 4,000 replies, dominating the timeline. Say Cheese Digital saw their post climb to 726 likes as the story spread. NFL rumors pulled in over 1,300 likes, while Susie Arizo dropped a video declaring Tillman a hero that snagged nearly 300 hearts. Tillman's pivot from the field to the force was unique, but he wasn't the only baller to wear the badge. Ex-Jet Laveranues Coles signed up with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office back in 2025. former Eagle Brandon Hughes took the oath in Falls Township, and Jahvid, the speedster from the Lions, joined the ranks of the SFPD. And let's not forget Dominique Williams, who earned his shield from the NYPD Academy in 2022. Just look at Jacksonville, where you can find a squad of at least 7 guys who traded their cleats for combat boots to serve on the force. It spreads across the board, too. Former big league hurler Jack Taschner signed on with the Appleton PD, while NHL veteran Deron Quint earned his shield patrolling the streets of Phoenix. But let's be real, none of those transitions sparked a media firestorm quite like the one surrounding Tillman. Nobody else walked away from a high-stakes federal badge over a moral line in the sand, only to spill the unvarnished truth to the entire planet on a podcast. Legends get recognized, which explains his induction into both the Louisiana and Chicagoland Sports Halls of Fame by 2025, all while his Cornerstone Foundation remains a lifeline for families fighting for their sick kids. Then there is his daughter, Tiana, now 17, and an athlete in her own right who faces the heavy reality that she might require a second heart transplant down the road. As for the man who spent 13 seasons peanut-punching footballs loose before devoting 8 years to federal service, he is sleeping soundly, fully at peace with every call he made along the way. He tipped his cap to the Bureau and his squad, but he exited on his own terms with a clear conscience, a prize that, in his book, outweighs any shiny badge or fat paycheck.